Quick AI Chronicles, everyone. I'm here with a new episode, and this time I invited Patrick Barker, who's the CTO at Kentaurus AI and also a part of MLOps community, which is where I met him. Hi, Patrick. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing today? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming. Are you in Colorado or elsewhere?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder,
Yeah, here
Colorado.
most of my life. Yeah.
Oh,
The
nice. How's the weather there like?
weather is cold. It's snowing as it usually does this time of year. So it's cold and snowy, but it's also kind of cozy. So
Nice, nice. Yeah, I kind of would prefer snow over the California rains that has been going on, but hopefully it gets better soon. But yeah, anyhow, so a few weeks back, I spoke with Rahul Parandekar, who you might know,
yep.
through the same community Slack group. So him and we touched a little bit on what are autonomous agents and how does one build such an agent and what goes on and other such details. But before we get into the agents topic, which I want to talk with you, because I know that you have a ton of experience there, I'd love to discuss what has become the talk of the town since this Gen AI boom, and that is open source technology.
Mhm.
So why don't we just start with the basics? According to you, why should one open source their code or model?
Yeah, so open sourcing is super important just because we can build these really strong foundational layers on the community.
Mhm,
If you put something out in the public and you allow anyone to contribute to it, it allows us to build these really strong bases where we get a high diversity of thoughts into projects. And then off of those bases, you can build, paid products that you can actually make money on. But us
mhm.
all collaborating on the base is really the most efficient means of doing that.
Fair enough. And how should one contribute to any open source project?
Yeah, so I mean, if it's a good project, they'll definitely have like a contributing guide, hopefully.
Hmm.
If
Okay.
they don't have that, a good way, if you're just interested in like contributing to it in general, go through the issues. A lot of times people will mark an issue with like good first issue to kind of get you
Hmm.
on board with the product. And yeah, if they don't do that, or if you want to make a particular change, usually just, pull the repo down and just start playing with it and see if you can make the change. Generally, you want to fork the repo into your own private namespace. Make the changes you make, test it, and then put up a PR. Sometimes it can help to just, directly channel with one of the maintainers. A lot of times
Hmm.
that'll really help kind of get your ideas through. And reach out to them on Slack or on Twitter or whatever means you might have, and just say, hey, I want to do this thing, and would you accept a PR? So that's usually a good way to go about it, and it's a good way to meet people, and it's a good way to get experience in a wide variety of technologies.
Yeah, and you're right. And I also feel like that's a good way to encourage more and more companies and individuals to open source their product or code, I think. More open
Definitely.
source, more people learn and more creativity, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's this fear of, large organizations have this like fear of open source that they're going to give away all their IP. And I think realistically, the amount of work it takes to
Mm,
do this stuff, it's not like someone could just go out and just copy your stuff. Like there's just a ton of knowledge you build up in doing the product. I don't think I've ever seen a case of like a company open sourcing a product and it tanking, their IP or taking their revenue or something. In fact, usually it's the opposite. Usually they get developers who start contributing to it, they build a large community, and then they're able to upsell to those developers.
gotcha. I think, yeah, you kind of answered, like started answering my next question as well. It's like, what kind of projects can one open source to the public? Because I know, as you said, like few companies are afraid of, tanking their IP, but what kind of projects are okay to open source, I guess?
Yeah, it totally depends on the company, right? So I I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of great open source companies. Like I worked for Heptio, which was the
Mm,
creators of Kubernetes. And we just open sourced everything, because it was the Kubernetes company and Kubernetes is open source, and we just built, endless open source products. And that was super fun. I've worked for other companies that were, not as big on open source, and you have to really sort of negotiate it within the organization. Luckily, a lot of these big companies now have gotten open source offices, actually. So they have people in within the company that are specifically focused on creating open source products and figuring out what they can open source within their company. And that's been incredibly beneficial. That's really kind of a recent thing that's happened over the last 5 years. That's really
mm-hmm.
a lot of these companies sort of open up and be able to contribute to the ecosystem a lot better.
You think many more companies should adopt this open source office concept? Because honestly, I've never heard open source office until you told me. So yeah.
The short term is called OSPO,
Okay.
and there is a whole community around it, like people who do that as well. A
Hmm.
lot of the major companies have it now. I would say, if you're a big company and you don't have it, you should push for it in your organization because I think they're really useful. But there's a level like the company needs to be big enough to support something like that. A smaller
Yeah.
sized company just can't afford to like hire someone to
Right.
do source full time. Like it doesn't make sense unless that's a really core piece of your strategy.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I think hopefully this will encourage people to go more open source and contribute more into the open source projects, I think. Speaking of, projects, and especially when it comes to machine learning or, Gen AI projects, infrastructure is a very integral part. And do you have any favorite infrastructure that you generally use?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I kind of come from the Kubernetes world, so I'm a huge
Yeah.
Kubernetes fan. Got into that early, and I've worked in there for quite some time. I love Kubernetes. I love using it for machine learning and everything else. I will say I'm running into issues nowadays using Kubernetes for like fine tuning large language
Oh,
models because of GPU availability being such a problem. So
yeah.
yeah, it's quite hard to do this right now because GPUs within a given region are
Hmm.
only so available, and you really want, because there's such a limitation, you want to be able to look in all regions. But in order to
Right.
look at all regions, if you want to use Kubernetes, then you'd have to have a Kubernetes cluster in all regions, which doesn't really make sense.
Mm.
And that gets expensive. So Kubernetes is having a bit of a problem right now, I think, with the GPU availability stuff. So I'm actually running a lot of my GPU workloads just on RunPod today because I found them to have pretty exceptional availability. And it's really simple. You just give it a container and you can configure some stuff around it. It's a little like a light Kubernetes, SaaS version that has really good access to GPUs. So we're in an interesting space right now with that.
Okay. Do you think, and what was the name again? You said Runbot?
Yeah, RunPod. Yeah.
Runbot. Okay. So do you think it might, I mean, you would be able to actually just replace your Kubernetes with Runbot in future, unless Kubernetes get back with, more GPU.
Yeah, not the whole thing. I mean, if all you're doing is fine tuning models, then yeah, you
Hmm.
could potentially do that. But generally you have like a lot of other services, and
Right.
what Kubernetes has been fantastic at is if you have a lot of services,
Hmm.
managing those in a way that they can easily communicate with each other, kind of live in the same plane, and you can control that stuff very easily. And that's really
Hmm.
where Kubernetes excels. So if an organization with several services, Kubernetes can be really useful. The cloud providers have made it super duper easy to kind of spin up and manage nowadays. So it's pretty lightweight. It doesn't cost a whole lot anymore. Not like back in the day, it was a real pain to manage. So we've come a long way on that, but we still kind of have this GPU problem.
I think so. I feel like it's a global problem now with the whole GPU access and availability. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a mad dash. So
Great. So I think now it gives me a nice segue to get into the fun topic, which is the autonomous agents.
hmm.
So given that you have a ton of experience, the first question around that I would want to ask you is like, how did you get started in this subfield of AI?
Yeah, so I was really into reinforcement learning kind of back in the day. I
Mm-hmm.
studied reinforcement learning like probably 2016. Did a couple of projects in reinforcement learning a couple years later, where I tried to do reinforcement learning in the Go programming language.
Oh,
Kind of
nice.
see if I could do it. And they were super fun to work on. Ultimately, Go has a problem with its memory model that makes it really hard to use GPUs in Go. Uh, Go's memory model is like fantastic if you're doing web services, but
Mm-hmm.
basically you have to do something called trampolining to a C process, and that takes too much time to make it efficient for getting like GPU workloads, unless you're doing large batches. So they kind of have a problem like at the core of Go.
Mm-hmm.
Machine learning, but it's really fun to work on. I learned a ton about, just building machine learning and reinforcement learning solutions from scratch. And ever since then, I've been just followed the field and tried to stay up on it. And then, yeah, with the advent of LLMs, I think it's just super duper exciting that now we have this really pretty good reasoning agent. They're not incredible yet, but they're a lot better than what we've had previously. And trying to kind
Mm-hmm.
of mash those ideas with the previous reinforcement learning stuff we've been doing, it's been a ton of fun.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I have never used Go. I've always went through so many different programming languages through my academics and industry experience. I stay put with Python. I'm like, okay, you're a nice language. I'm gonna stick with you. You're easy to learn.
Yeah, yeah, Python. I love Python. Yeah, I started my career in Python, and then I went and did like Go, and I've learned Rust, and done a bunch of other languages. But I've come back to Python and just been like, it's still a great language. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to use.
I agree. Although I get these FOMO feelings around Rust and Go, especially Rust, because I in Bay Area people talk about Rust a
Yeah,
lot. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe later.
I mean the
Awesome.
Rust Python interop super duper good. So there's
Yeah.
what is like Pyo3, I think, is the library. And so
Hmm.
now, like, instead of creating C extensions in Python, which is really what it's
Right.
kind of made for, you can create these Rust extensions, and it's a lot better kind of situation.
Yeah.
So,
Python is amazing. Yeah.
yeah. And we might get real threads in Python soon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That would be game changing.
I mean, incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Meta's
Yeah.
put $1 million towards that effort. So, or I
Wow.
think they pledged 3 engineers or something towards that effort. So we might have it in the next
Hmm.
release. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Okay. That's good to know. Great. Can you tell us, maybe briefly, what is an autonomous agent? I know you touched, like, you gave like the preface about where it came from, like reinforcement learning, but if you had to give an explanation to someone who has absolutely no knowledge of either reinforcement learning or autonomous agent, how would you go about explaining that?
Yeah, an autonomous agent is really just a process that is modeling, the world, and it is then taking actions in the world autonomously based on its environment and based on a goal. So you can
Okay.
give it a goal of a goal could be anything, right? And goal could be, you have say opentable.com and you want to book a reservation. So that's your goal. And then the agent can has this goal in mind, and then it has, web interface in this case that it's going to interact with, and it's
Mhm.
going to take actions in that web environment until it achieves its goal.
Awesome. Wow, that was one of the best explanations I've come across. Really nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So, what are some of the cool use cases you have seen for autonomous agents?
So there's a ton of really cool ideas. I don't
Hmm.
think, we're really early in this stage of trying
Okay.
to make these things fully autonomous. My
Hmm.
company is currently focused on more semi-autonomous agents, which I think is
Hmm.
effective at this kind of stage in the game. So there's definitely a spectrum of autonomy. We're focused on, having agents be able to come back to you and ask when they have questions, because
Yeah.
what's holding back a lot of these use cases is, it was the same problems we had in reinforcement learning, where you have this long tail of actions
Hmm.
you need to take to get somewhere in a very big space, and
Got it.
it's really easy to get lost. You take a wrong
Uh,
step, any one of those, you can very easily get lost. So, we're focused on if it gets lost or if it's unsure,
hmm.
come back to the user and get clarification on that. But
Yeah.
future use cases that we'll definitely see is I mean, it's really everything. These things will act, like digital humans within computers that are really able to accomplish most tasks, which would be super exciting. Maybe scary in some ways, but
I was a little assured. I'm like, digital humans. Jeez. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm sure people will have thoughts about that. Just
oh,
thinking about. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying something.
oh no, no, yeah, I'm sure. Like, there's a lot of fear, but there's a lot of potential too. Obviously, like
I
we could
agree.
get things loose on trying to solve a disease or something like that, and give them the appropriate tools
Mm.
to do that, and we could potentially cure a bunch of diseases. And there's a lot of really great things we could do, and there's a lot of potentially scary things. So we need to,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's always the case in technology, though.
Yeah,
So.
I think so. It just boils down to how does one person use these technology. It just depends on that.
Mhm.
So when you said semi-autonomous, is that the part where the agent will come back to the human to get more clarification? Is that why you say that it's semi-autonomous agent?
Yeah,
Okay.
and be able to provide them a little bit of direction, right? So you can
Okay.
just kind of nudge them when they're getting lost, or if they seem like they're not solving the task fast enough, they're stuck in a loop somewhere, they've gone a wrong direction. Just be able to come in and kind of correct them, and for them to be able to learn from you doing that as well. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And do you think if the agent gets lost, is it because of the space they're working in or having like multiple directions to go, which is why they get lost?
Yeah, I mean it's a combination of it's definitely space complexity, right? You're doing pretty open-ended tasks. And it's also it's a combination of a couple other things. One is we're not really training large language models this way yet. We're
Right,
not
right.
doing with a time dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Some that we're not doing. What we see is that when we fine-tune these models with that sort of time dimension and that environmental
Space. Mm-hmm.
reaction, they perform a lot better. But if we were to really train them at their core in that way, I think they would do much, much better. And the other problem is I think they're just probably not quite smart enough, right? So
Okay.
when you think about our smartest model, GPT-4, which is rumored to have, over a trillion parameters, that's still very shy of the human brain, which has 100 trillion parameters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're still quite a ways off, I think. And like some of these
Mm,
concepts, I think we just don't have like enough parameter count in there to account for the complexity.
understood. Got it. So, if you have to like give a roadmap when, so for example, if I come to you, I do not have any reinforcement learning or agent background. So if I come to you and ask you, could you give me a roadmap because I want to get into this field and I want to build an agent. So I want
Mhm.
like a roadmap of how to like build such an agent for whatever use case.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually just did a talk on this, which was I basically taught people how to do the React loop from scratch. And so the React loop is just a very basic autonomous loop that you can use without LLMs, where you basically just say, here's your environment, here are the potential actions that you can take in that, here's your goal.
Hmm.
Choose one of these actions to take, and then it takes it and it says, okay, here's what happened when you took that action. And then it just kind of keeps going in that loop. You can code one of these. I tried to do it live in Python and in like an hour, and I didn't quite get there, but you can get pretty
Oops.
close to doing this just like in raw Python with just OpenAI. You can do it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I really encourage people to start there. Just like start the React loop, code it yourself from scratch so you really kind of understand what it's doing. And then there's just a ton of variations you could kind of do on top of that going forward.
So if I heard you right, you said React Leap or React Code?
React loop.
Loop. Okay. Not
Yeah,
exactly that, but React Loop.
what it
Got it.
stands for. It's like R lowercase e uppercase ACT, and it stands for something. I'd have to link it up
Got
real.
it. Got it.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's definitely probably the best place to start. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to see if I can get the what the name
Is it
was.
like a framework to build an agent? What it is?
It's really like an instruction for
Okay.
LLMs
Okay.
that
Okay.
you can kind of plug up
Oh.
code. And I forget, yeah, it's the original thing was called the React REPL agent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically plugged up. And I'm trying to see what React stands for again. I forget. That might make it easier for people to find, but I don't see it on the page. But maybe we
That's
could
okay.
link that in the notes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll share the link towards the end. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. And so again, touching the point of infrastructure, but for this one, it's like, what is the infrastructure you use or suggest to build autonomous agents or semi-autonomous agents?
Yeah. You can use a lot of different infrastructures, right? I think, going from the basic of like, hey, we're just going to take Python and a Jupyter notebook and we're going to
Hmm.
use AI and we're going to use the React loop. That's like probably the most basic sort of
Okay.
setup you can get
Hmm.
going. What you'll find issue, the main issue you'll find with that is you will run up a huge OpenAI bill very, very quickly.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, you will look at your OpenAI account and you'll be like, oh my God. And it's just caused by these agents need to take a lot of actions and they kind of need to, iterate through the environment a bunch of different times. And you're just
Hmm.
calling them a bunch of times. And a lot of times you're using a pretty big context window because you have to
Hmm.
fit in the schema of the actions and whatnot. Um, And so um, you pretty rapidly want to move towards using some sort of open source LLM or a cheaper LLM that you can potentially fine tune on a more specific task, right? And that you can hit more frequently. So, you know, finding a cheaper LLM, however you might do that, is usually pays. If you can run one locally on a machine or you can run one on your own server,
Mhm.
it's gonna be a lot easier to play around with this stuff, both from speed of latency and from cost. Although GPT-4 is, probably the best reasoner still, so you can run into some stuff there around, GPT-4 just being smarter and maybe more able to accomplish a task.
Got it. Okay. So, besides the crazy OpenAI bill, what are the other challenges do you think while building such an agent?
Yeah, another one's just sort of, and this is kind of the whole problem with agents right now is them just kind of running off in bad directions. So a lot of it's,
Mm,
finding a way to provide feedback, finding a way to, learn from the mistakes, really finding a good way to observe what the agents are doing and why they're doing it. There's, a whole set of, theory obviously around fetching context. And can you fetch, better context from the environment? Can you enhance that context with knowledge bases or whatnot to make them smarter and, more capable of creating a task? And then yeah, obviously, like the whole instruction schema, how you go about that, it's like how you're instructing the LLM. There's a whole piece to like, how you do that, and there's a bunch of different versions of that. And you can kind of create your own if you want to. It's pretty easy to do. So yeah, those are usually the things you have to watch out for.
got it. Okay. So, I what is the so every time I think about these new technologies, my initial question is like, what is the business value, or how are these technologies adding to your business value? So, what do you think about agents adding? What kind of value does it add to us or any business?
Yeah, currently not a whole lot, right?
Mm,
So like when you look at fully autonomous agents, they're just not reliable enough today to
mhm.
be valuable. But I look at this very much like what machine learning was for the last, I mean, 50 years, right? It was this
Yeah.
really kind of bespoke thing that very few companies had machine learning engineers. Some had
Mhm.
data scientists. Almost none of them were focused on AGI. There's like one or two
Uh,
companies that were focused on
yeah.
AGI, and everyone thought they were crazy. And there was just very little investment in the space overall. But then, like the second, we have Chat GPT, now there's just, billions of dollars rolling in because now all of a sudden people see that like, this thing is actually useful. And not only is it useful, it's one of the most useful things that's, ever been built. And if we make it even better, it's going to be even, pretty, you know, way more useful and could potentially replace much of human tasks. And it's the same thing with agents. Like we're kind of at this stage right now where, yeah, if you're looking at full autonomous agents, a lot of people think it's cool, but very few people are buying this stuff. It's not useful. But in a year or 2 years, if we get a GPT-5, if we get smarter models, if we get better at these agents learning from their mistakes and being able to navigate, these open spaces, we could start to have agents that are, unbelievably useful, right? It's like a human operating computer that's never tired, probably produces less errors, is really cheap, so it has this potential to be, one of the biggest things we've ever seen in tech. But right now,
Mhm.
we're just in a funny space where it's just not actually that useful. Yeah.
It's more like experimentation phase kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you think that these agents will have a lasting future impact?
Oh yeah, I mean it's the future of everything. Yeah, I mean
Hmm.
we're very close. I think just transforming our entire economy, our entire way of living. The next 5, 10 years are going to be, I think, the biggest upheaval we've ever seen in society in our generation. Hopefully, it goes well.
Hmm.
Go bad if we aren't like good stewards of of technology. Luckily, I think the people who are winning right now, like Sam, are very focused on also rolling this out in a way that's beneficial to people. But I think there's going to be a lot of particularly in politics, I think it's going to get really, really interesting as, deepfakes have hit a level that's, pretty wildly convincing. And then there's going to be a lot of probably job displacement. And there's definitely a future in which this goes really bad. And we have to be super careful that we don't run into that. But there's a future in which it gets really, really good too. So, I mean, hopefully we can navigate that.
I bet more regulations would help, probably.
Probably help. Yeah, yeah. I don't think we should slow development, but I think we need to just be really cognizant of the workers who are going to potentially be replaced here and the effects that'll have on our society.
Got it. Nice. I think I learned a great deal of autonomous agents. I mean, some of those terms you mentioned, or like, the React loop and such, I had no idea they exist. So I'm really glad to have this conversation with you. I think it was very informative, and yeah, I think anybody who's interested could get some really good suggestions and where to start from. So yeah,
Awesome.
thanks a lot, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Cheers. Bye.